Hello, Christ is in our midst. I'm Father Kevin Long of St. Elias Antiochian Orthodox Church in Newcastle, Pennsylvania. From time to time, I will use this space as an opportunity to answer some questions that I might get either through the comment section or something that's asked to me by a parishioner that I think might stand to be recorded and sent out to everybody. So, with that in mind, this is the question that I was asked for today. Father, are you in agreement that the Western Church, the Catholic Church, and the Eastern Church, Catholic Church, might try and unite? Well, okay. Well, let's take a look at that from a couple of different angles. The first, my opinion is strictly my opinion, okay? There are opinions that matter, like bishop opinions, and then there are opinions that don't matter, like, mine. So don't take this for any kind of official Orthodox statement. I have nothing to add to that other than what's already been said by bishops and elders of the Orthodox Church, and I would defer to them on just about everything. With that said, I do want to make some thoughts known as we try to figure out our life together in an increasingly complicated world. Okay, so the first thing is the difference between the so-called Roman Catholic Church and the so-called Greek Orthodox Church, or however you want to list it. Out in Syria, we'd be called the Rooms, the Roman Orthodox Church. So obviously those names kind of get tossed around and become confusing. But we have a church under a pope, Pope Francis to be specific, because there's another church that's under a pope in the Coptic Orthodox Church. And then there's the Church of the Orthodox. And even there, greater divisions, and we'll get to that in a minute. So the split between the two major churches, the one we'll call Catholic just to be lazy, and the other Orthodox to be equally lazy, those differences are thousands at this point, at least 1,000 years old. And so what are we to make of that? How in the world would we even begin to try to reconcile a millennia's worth of differences in such a short amount of time? So the first answer is anything that would bring about some kind of unity between those two churches would take a lot of work and, to be honest, a lot of miracles. So I don't really see that happening, not in the near future, and maybe not in any future. Certainly not in my lifetime, and probably not in the lifetime of my kids or my kids' kids or anything like that. There are certain reasons that call for unity, and we do not experience those reasons at this present moment. Most of those reasons, by the way, are political. And interestingly enough, most of the reasons for the divisions are political. So you have that. So then the second thing is our differences, the ones that are theological, even they have some, we've seen movement in certain directions, especially on the part of the Roman Catholic Church. And again, especially under Pope John Paul II, where he instructed Roman Catholic clerics to skip the reading of the Filioque, that great controversial little fragment within the Nicene Creed that is part of the Western Creed and not part of the same creed in the East. Filioque literally meaning "and the Son," where we are talking about the procession of the Holy Spirit going from the Father or going from the Father and the Son. We do not believe in the Orthodox Church that the Holy Spirit proceeds from the Father and the Son, just the Father. And in fact, there is an inscription on one of the archways of a major church in the Vatican that has the Nicene Creed as the Orthodox state it. That was meant to be a division. It created a division. It divided the two Christian entities to make one easier to manipulate and the other easier to ignore. Thank you, Charlemagne. So we have that kind of disparity that we have to resolve in some way, shape, or form. Now, another issue that we have to deal with is, let's be honest, equally, that in the Orthodox Church, there is not exactly unity. Yes, we're all going to agree on the reading of the creed. We are all going to say the same thing. But let's ask another question. Who forms an ecumenical council, or a great council, if we can't call it ecumenical? Who's responsible for its organization? Would that be the ecumenical patriarch? Well, some factions within the Orthodox Church would say yes. Okay, I don't know. Ask maybe the Patriarchate of Moscow. What would they say? They would probably disagree, because they have reasons of their own to state that disagreement. Now, again, look at the two. If we do decide to hold a great council and everyone participates, which is unlikely at this time, then who serves on the council? Would it be every bishop? If it's every bishop, there are a lot of bishops in the Moscow Patriarchate. Over 3,000 to my awareness. So they would obviously rule the day on any decision that was made. Would the ecumenical patriarch agree with that? Absolutely not. Which is why the last time there was an attempt at this great council, 10 of the Orthodox churches were willing to meet, 4 of them stayed away, including the Patriarchate of Antioch. So it's not quite that simple. So if Rome were to try to create some kind of unity with the Orthodox world, well, which Orthodox world are you looking for? So there's that, okay? And I'm not trying to make light of this, certainly not. I'm also not trying to drive us into some sense of despair either, because obviously the quest for unity is elusive. So what do I do? Well, there are a couple of other things that I have to say to sort of get things into the right perspective. The first one is, as I said at the very beginning, a lot of this is not up to me, and I'm really not going to try to make any kind of definitive statement. In that vein, I'm really not allowed to participate in so-called ecumenical services without the express permission of my presiding hierarch. So in this case, it would be my Metropolitan Saba. I can't go and do a service in the town of Newcastle even, and in some way where especially there's some kind of sacramental act being done, that is way out of the pale of anything that I could consider doing. We would not do joint communion. We would not do joint baptisms. Not that I've ever even seen such a thing. But we wouldn't have that kind of a service where I could be a participant. And I would also have to be really careful that the participation, even if I were allowed to participate, never goes beyond the level of what is appropriate. If someone gets up in the middle of a sermon and speaks some kind of anti-Trinitarian message where they deny the Godhead of Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, one essence, 3 persons, well, then what am I doing there? Why would I participate? I shouldn't, because there are certain dogmatic statements that exist within the Orthodox Church that are really not up for debate. And those things should not be questioned, especially in some kind of context where worship might be involved. And so oftentimes what a bishop will say is it's better not to participate. You can go, but don't be a participant, or even in some cases, it's just best not to go. Now, we've had certain situations here in Newcastle, in Pennsylvania, where we've had horrible things happen in the community. The death of a child, for example. In fact, I did a funeral service for a young 8-year-old boy who had been murdered. That's obviously horrible, and the town wanted to do something. But to be perfectly honest, what I did for the child was had his funeral. I served his funeral because he was part of my church. The community wished to do something. Well, I attended, but I did not speak. I was present as the town expressed both its grief and its outrage, and so I thought it was appropriate to be a part of it, especially if there was a situation where the grief or the rage would be expressed in a way that was over the top, not controlled. So I would have been there in some small part to try to keep things still focused on what truly matters, the true, authentic grief, especially of the family, and the need for reconciliation, really for wholeness on the part of the entire community, to prevent these kinds of horrible acts from happening again. But never in the form of rage, never in the form of some sort of righteous indignation, because those things are here today and gone tomorrow. Lasting peace does not come through the expression of rage. It doesn't happen and it doesn't work. And so we have to understand that we need to balance these things in our lives. And then finally, I would say this. I think it is incumbent to all of us to understand each other. There was a great poster when I was in college. It was from the Mennonite Central Council, and they had a conference, I think. I don't know what they called themselves, but it was anyway the Central Committee of the Mennonite Church. It was on one of my professor's doors, and it said, "I have a modest proposal for peace. Let all Christian nations in the world agree not to kill each other," or something to that effect. That was really condemning, because if you think about it, there are so many times throughout history, it's playing out right now in the part of Ukraine and Russia, where there are two allegedly, supposedly, maybe obviously, but not to me, Christian nations attacking one another, killing one another, reviling one another, refusing to accept the humanity of one another. And, I mean, just so that we don't have any illusions here, I mean, there are Christians killing Christians even in our own military when they go to war in places like Iraq. We can't be blind to these kinds of things. Nevertheless, the lack of understanding one with the other is a lot of what causes these kinds of wars and difficulties. And so I think it is important to make sure that we as Orthodox Christians help others understand us, because a lot of times they don't understand the way we worship, they don't understand the way our hierarchy works, they don't understand a lot of things. And so it would be very useful for us to be able to explain those things in a peaceful environment where the temptation towards rumor and innuendo are put to rest forever. And it's also important for me to understand what makes a Presbyterian tick these days. What's going on with these so-called, non-denominational churches? I do have issue with that term. Nevertheless, what is going on? How do I understand them? How do I understand them as their people? And how do I make sure that I am being honest about how I perceive them, as opposed to the rumors and the stereotypes and all of those things? Because trust me, especially in America, the ones who are going to receive the most difficult time in terms of stereotyping are us Orthodox, because we are not of a Western background. We are of an Eastern European or of a Middle Eastern or of a Russian kind of a background. And those things are very different than what we see in Western Europe and, say, England or Germany or France or even Italy or a place like that. There's just enough difference between us that it really is important to make sure that we understand each other. And there are times here in Newcastle when there are situations that recall or that call to us working together, to roll up our sleeves and do common work together. And it would be better for us to do this kind of common work in a spirit of understanding, where we're not making assumptions about one another, but really understand one another. I'm not looking for unity beyond just the unity of my own parish. If we can achieve that, I would consider that major groundwork. So, honestly, what we need is humility, to recognize that Christ does love us, but he loves all humanity. Now, he may love us more. I don't know. That's up to him, not me. What I know about Orthodoxy is I know it helps me to worship correctly, as best as I possibly can. Does it mean that I'm an excellent politician or an excellent ethicist or anything like that? No, probably not. Okay? It means that I can worship in spirit and in truth. And if I live out the teachings of the gospel, especially the teachings of Christ, and say the Sermon on the Mount, or as right now we are reading the Epistle of St. James in our lexicon, our lectionary, then we embody those things where our faith is confirmed by our activities, by our word, by our fruits, those things that we exude to those out in the general public. The question comes to mind: if one were to accuse you of being a Christian, would there be enough evidence to convict you? It's an interesting question, and one that is worth asking in all of our cases. So, is there going to be unity? We're Christians. At the end of the day, we both believe in Jesus Christ. So, some point in the future, I do see there a possibility for unity. But right now, there are just way too many impediments, too many obstacles, too many politicians, political interests, material things, way too many different variables for us to have any degree of confidence that there'd be unity between us, Eastern Orthodox, and them, the papal Roman Catholic. I just don't see it. You can long for it, and like I said, I'm going to do what I can to understand and not treat them as enemies. I do not think that is valuable in any way, shape, or form. In fact, I think it's kind of stupid. But that's me. And we just need to spend time ecumenically to gain an understanding and a respect for one another. It does not mean that you have to respect everything that people teach. If they don't believe in the divinity of Christ or they don't believe in the divinity of the Holy Spirit, there's work to be done. Okay, but even then, we can still not throw stones at them or cast aspersions at them, but rather pray and in a spirit of humility find ways that we can work together to be genteel with one another and certainly not approach the realm of violence with one another. It's too important, being Christian, to let that kind of thing turn into something that basically looks like common warfare. May God help us. Okay, well, I hope that answers the question. If it does, awesome. If you have any further questions as a result of what I said here, you can certainly feel free to ask them in the comments section below. If you violently disagree with me because I'm violating some canon or some monk or something like that, I'm aware of those things. You can say what you want. I have my opinions. Like I said at the very beginning, these are my opinions. They are not any kind of official statement coming out of the Orthodox Church. And I'm very quick to make that point. So you want to have a debate, that's great. But in all likelihood, what I will do is say, well, you follow your starets, you follow your monk from Mount Athos or whatever, and may they help guide you towards salvation. I have my own heroes that way, and I'm following their teachings, so I do what I can to adhere to that. Okay, so there you are. I pray that you have a great day and that God blesses everyone, you and those you love. And keep them coming. Keep the questions coming. You take care. God bless you. We'll see you soon.